right. Well, Susan, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with your group, and everyone, thank you so much for sharing an hour of your time so we can talk about a bunch of things relevant to at least where I think a lot of aspects of academic work are headed in the next few years and decades. These are always weird presentations to give because um, you know, this is a fantastic doctoral program with a bunch of really great research parents. You're all being mentored by some really great people that are giving you fantastic advice. But what I've found over the years is that every once in a while it might be useful to sort of get an idea about aspects of professional development from folks who reside outside of your own research family. And actually, last year, a friend of mine, Lucina Uden, and I wrote a paper about this that was in Trends in Cognitive Sciences, and we call this presentation of an example of casual mentoring, and that QR code down there will take you to the paper. Um, if I have I'll send a PDF of the paper over to you all after this presentation is done. I would have put a link into a Dropbox folder thing, but I don't want to get sued by whichever publishing company owns Trends in Cognitive Sciences. Uh, okay. So, as I think about where academic work is headed in the foreseeable future, I think a lot about all the major societal disruptions we've all been a part of. The pandemic being an obvious one, and I'll discuss some recent data that came out to sort of speak to how the pandemic might be impacting all of our scholarly productivity. But there are also huge changes in the context of people reconsidering their current career paths and shifting paths and going to new industries altogether. And these sort of big changes have impacted a variety of different systems, and I don't think higher education is immune to these changes. And where I think a lot of these changes might impact academia functions not only along the lines of, well, how do these kinds of these changes impact what scholarly work I produce, how much I produce it, what's the quality of that work, and then of course that kind of impact has downstream effects on all kinds of aspects of academic careers. On the surface, uh, you know, when something big happens in society that might have perhaps a downward effect or a depressing effect on productivity, or our first reaction might be, well, this is all bad news. But I actually think there are a variety of good pieces of news in reference to the pandemic, the Great Resignation, and its impact on academic work. And we'll go into those bits in a second. But one of the things that's really important to consider is that, yeah, the pandemic's impact on our productivity, uh, and other elements, other big societal changes, uh, create a lot of uncertainty. And academics get a lot of practice with uncertainty. You submit a paper to a journal, you don't know if it's going to get published. You submit a training grant to the NIH, you don't know if it's going to get funded. This is all stuff we're all kind of used to. And those that kind of uncertainty is coupled with other pieces of uncertainty that we see on a day-to-day basis in graduate training. So you take a class, you open your syllabus, you read a textbook, you see citations of people in there, and they're all sort of big giants in the field that you all look up to, and a normative reaction to those kinds of experiences is to say, like, what am I doing here, right? That's what we call imposter syndrome. We all experience it when we first get admitted into graduate school. we all experience it when when we're first hired as faculty. It doesn't go away. It never goes away. That's okay. Yeah, I actually find it kind of inspiring that that doesn't go away, because it sort of revolves around this idea that even folks you sort of read in those textbooks and you read art and whose articles you read, chances are at any one given time point you ask them what your plans are, and they might tell you, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just walking around like a stray bear, and the people that I work with sort of move raw meat to different parts of the forest, and I just go over there. That's basically how we all do this job. Um, and then that points out all these different kinds of questions we might have. If that's the way that the academic world works, not only where do I fit in, but can I join it? And there are all kinds of ways in which we can think about this. I tend to think it's all a net positive.
Andy,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The audio is going in and out, and I don't know that I have a fix for it, but if maybe you've got a mobile microphone, if you can put it closer to your mouth or something.
No. I actually have been getting this from time to time. It might have some. I'm plugged into Ethernet over here, so I should be able to get a reliable audio signal. But
Like right now, it's perfect. I'm not,
right now
I'm
it's
not
perfect. Okay,
sure.
it might be the fact that like sometimes that when I move, yeah. So I'll try to keep my hands away from audio pieces around here.
Okay,
My
thank you.
apologies for that. It's probably on my side. Anyway, all right. So I tend to think all of this is a net positive. And part of that has to do with the fact that you know in my side hustle, so I run a lab like everybody else, but my side hustle is doing professional development stuff like this. I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, and it's partially due to the fact that like you all, I got training in psychology, so that basically means I'm addicted to understanding patterns in behavior and trying to change them. And so that obviously that applies to my research. Also applies to a lot of the work that I do here. And in the context of professional development circumstances like this, I get a lot since I get a lot of practice observing how trainees and early career faculty encounter various points of uncertainty. I get a lot of ideas on how to discuss them. And so some of those ideas are in a lot of other presentations that we do through this annual meeting that we call the Future Directions Forum. That's a nice little picture from when we used to hold these things in person, the good old days. Hopefully, we'll go back to those at some point. And at the end of this workshop, I'll put up a QR code that'll take you to our on-demand channel for the forum. But for now, what I'll do for the remainder of our time is I'll sort of highlight three emerging themes that I'm seeing, at least I'm seeing in academic work. I'd be curious to see what you all think. They're obviously influenced by some of the societal changes we were discussing previously, and I'll sort of talk about some sort of take-home messages and tips that I draw from some of my thoughts about these themes. That's called theme 2. It should be called theme 1. Here's the thing about that I want to start off with, and it has to do with this quote from a classic movie, Casablanca. The operative term here being "hill of beans," and I think one of the biggest perennial problems in academic work is our obsession with counting beans. In this case, our beans are papers we publish in journals, chapters we publish in books. We tend to be hyper focused on how many of these things we produce. I think that we may very well be headed to a change that'll push us away from quantity and focus our attention instead on the quality of the work. And here are a couple of reasons why I think that might be. This QR code will take you to an infographic from a recent NIH report of tens of thousands of researchers and asking them questions surrounding, it's a survey asking questions surrounding how the pandemic has impacted productivity, and the take-home message is it's depressed productivity. It's pushed down productivity for the grand majority of people who conduct research who are connected at all with the NIH. I tend to think this is not temporary. I tend to think this is permanent, and part of that's influenced by the notion that for many of my colleagues and I, when we have conversations about the pandemic, where the conversations will typically go is something to the effect of one of us disclosing to the other that we've changed our relationship to work. And that usually means that the following. My relationship to my work now, to a lesser extent than it did before the pandemic, is not negatively impacting my health, right? And then the other one in that conversation says, "Oh, thank you for saying that. That's me too." So I think we've pushed away. I think a lot of us have not only been impacted by the pandemic, but perhaps permanently, because we've said to ourselves, it's silly letting a job impact our health this much. I think productivity is one of the culprits. Thinking that we have to maintain a certain level of productivity outside and above what's considered normal or healthy. So that's that's one kind of shift. The other shift that I'm seeing is that even among us who are no longer considered early career, I moved out of the operational definition that APA has. That's PhD within the last 10 years. So that's like 4 years ago for me now. I'm seeing stuff on social media that tells me, this QR code will take you to this tweet and a conversation about it. This is a tweet that Mitch Prinstein posted about a year ago. And what he was noticing from a lot of his junior colleagues is that is the following idea. I just got this job in the last year or two. I'm gonna produce scholarly work because it's in my contract, but how much I produce isn't going to define me. There are other parts of this job that I value, and I'm going to value all those things. I'm going to put work and effort into those things at the expense of, whatever kind of motivator that you want to put my way that keep me focused on raw productivity. So that's something that Mitch has been seeing. That's something that I've been seeing when I have conversations with early career faculty. So I think this is a shift in the positive direction as well. And where I think these dual influences on productivity are going to wind up landing is a demonstrable shift towards us prioritizing the quality of people's work, not simply how much you're producing. Here's the interesting thing that I find with regards to this shift. This data is already out there. We can already see it. It's been staring us in the face for a long time, the data that justify the shift to quality. I'm going to ask for your participation. In the chat box, please enter the name of somebody, your research hero, the person who you've read in class, the person who you studied in your thesis, who's making their way to citations for your dissertation or what have you. Put that person's name in the chat box so we can all see it. And the one kind of quasi requirement, don't put anybody who's out of Alabama. Come on, it's just your family. It's just somebody outside of your family whose work you find inspiring. Who are some names? That's ridiculous, Susan. Come on, pick somebody who's got skills. Alan, yes, but me, come on. Alfie Cohn. All right, who else? Bridget is Nicholas' hero. Bridget is a grad student of ours. Susan White, John Weiss. Yes, Lars Goran Oost. Yes. Of one session One session treatment fame. Scott Lilienfeld. Yeah, yeah. Joel Nigg. Also, yeah. All these are just amazing names. I love them all. Uh, Quick question. Um, Here's a question. Ballpark it. How many articles have each of these heroes published? It's been hundreds, right? Hundred. I think Alan is probably north of 1,000. Okay. Okay. So you've just told me about your hero. Your hero's probably published hundreds of papers. How many of those articles have you read? What? 10? How many people have read more than 35 Scott Lilienfeld articles? Probably not that many, right? Okay. That's one bit of it. So even among our heroes, they've often published way more papers than we've read of theirs. But that's something you see in all elements of work. I'm going to show you a couple of examples and to give you a sense of what I mean. All right, I'm going to take you to some of these Google Scholar pages, and what you're going to see in each of these pages is the following: a general trend that looks a bit like a cliff, right? If you track just one metric, citations are just one metric, right? If you track just citation count, everybody's record looks a bit like a really big cliff. A few papers get to the very top of that cliff, but then after the few papers, everything drops like a rock. I'm going to show you a few examples, give you a sense of what I mean. I'm going to back out of this PowerPoint presentation to show you a few of these. Okay. I'm going to start with me first to show you that I have a soft underbelly. All right. So can people still see this? Okay. All right. So let's pretend that like my record is like Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence is an awesome actress. And way up here, over here, is Jennifer Lawrence's Silver Linings Playbook. And all the way down here is Passengers, the movie that no one saw. All right? Everybody's record is like this. My tiny cliff that currently is at 10,000 is dwarfed by Terry Moffat's monstrous citation cliff. And even Terry Moffat's monstrous citation cliff has a huge drop-off. It's a relative drop-off. At the very bottom of her top 20 is still an amazing paper, but it's but a fraction of the paper that she's most known for. The same with Phil Kendall. My favorite example of this, Ron Kessler. All of us have cited Ron Kessler at some point based on his really great epidemiological work. And Ron Kessler has roughly 500,000 citations. And you see this cliff issue in Ron Kessler's work as well. This is all of us. This is all of us. All of us show this pattern in our scholarly productivity. And that's why, to maintain a healthy balance in my own work, one of the big shifts I've had in terms of my relationship with my own work the last few years is I hypothesize that the academic world, all of you, all of the departments on the planet, has just enough bandwidth to digest a really small sliver of what I produce ultimately in my career, right? And the number I use for myself is 5. I keep myself to this idea of I'll keep on producing work, I still have to stay busy, but at the end of this, when I retire, people will probably find the most value in a handful of pieces of work that I produce, and the number I use is 5. Is What about 6? What about 4? I'm doing the best I can, guys. 5. All right. What's great about this is that I see this pattern not just in academia, but in lots of other industries where production happens, where people produce things. Regina King is a hero of mine. She's amazing. Lots of films, great great TV work. When Regina King retires, hopefully several decades from now, so far, at least a couple of these are going to wind up making her top 5. Her directorial debut, One Night in Miami, amazing film. If Beale Street Could Talk, this is when she got the Oscar for. She was brilliant in Watchmen. If you haven't seen that, and this is Regina King across a couple of decades worth of work. She's had a really long, illustrious career. Sometimes the pattern you see, the top 5, at least in Hollywood, sometimes it occurs in a very short time span, even though that person had a long career. So Al Pacino, north of 50 films, several decades worth of work. My argument, his top 5 all happened in the 1970s. He's done a bunch of really great stuff since then. Scent of a Woman, Any Given Sunday, Heat, Devil's Advocate, bunch of great films. In all likelihood, these are the ones he'll be known for. Cate Blanchett, a career more similar to King's in that she's produced a lot of really great films, and her likely 5 are probably traversing several decades worth of work. Everybody's patterns are a little bit different. I think academics are like that as well. So with academics, what you tend to see is a scholarly record that looks a bit like Hollywood, also a bit like a baseball season, like a season of baseball. Lots of base hits, way less home runs than base hits, and at the end of the day, I think we have it better than baseball players. And by that I mean baseball players have to produce and for certain positions on the field, they're expected to hit a lot of home runs every year. In academia, the good news is, they might be expected at a couple of home runs here and there, but not in one year over the course of several decades over an entire career. That's a way. I think that if a baseball player had that in their contract, all you got to do is hit 5 home runs, and like for as long as you're a ball player, they try to sign that contract twice. I think this is a healthy way of looking at things because it also pulls you away from comparing yourself to other people. Like you saw me like show all these different like people's cliffs, right? I don't have an aspiration to have a cliff the size of Terry Moffat's or Phil Kendall's or Ron Kessler's. I don't have that aspiration. My aspiration is be happy with the cliff that I've made for myself, and I try to outdo the cliff I had last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. So what does that look like in concrete terms? Well, what it looks like in concrete terms is like everybody else. I keep a CV. I post a CV online. It's there with me. That's the way that I keep track of what I've done. I also keep like an under the radar kind of short list on my local drive that I can return to on occasion to sort of get perspective on my career. That list that nobody else sees but myself is that subset of work where I say to myself, if I retire tomorrow, I'm happy with what I have on this list. These are the 5 things that I'm most proud that I was a part of while I was doing this job. If I retire tomorrow, this is fine. This is a fine way to end things up. Right? Now the neat thing about all that is that that list can change at any one point. So my own list, I got 5 things on there. 1 or 2 of them I think are peak me. I can't outdo them. And there's 2 or 3 in the list where I'm like, nah, I can do better than that. They're kind of like placeholders. Right? So that kind of goes back to that Hemingway quote, like just try to outdo your former self. That's true nobility. Okay, this is a real theme too. That should have been theme one. This is theme two. All right, I love this theme. Is it keeps us on baseball. My family's Cuban, so we only like the sports that involve hitting stuff. Baseball, boxing, hitting people. It's not that good, but the baseball. We'll stick with the baseball. All right. So so stick with Miguel Cabrera. He's the last guy to win this recognition in baseball called the Triple Crown. It's basically when a ball player in any one season has the best batting average, so he gets on base safely at a given rate, most home runs in a year, and the most runs batted in. Like when people were on base, he hit something or created an action that produced a run. All right. The last guy to do that was Carl Yastrzemski. Played with at that time. Yeah, I think he might have been with the Red Sox. It could have been with the Cardinals. I might mixing them up with somebody else. So yeah, this was a really big deal because it hadn't happened in several decades. It might not ever happen again. Here's what I love about this this analogy and how it relates to academic work. Because when Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown, his numbers were amazing. It's really hard to do all these three things in 1 year and outdo everybody else in the league on each of these domains. But even if you're looking at the batting average, you're failing like close to 70% of the time with a batting average like that. Right? And you're striking out a ton. Now, with Cabrera, like all ball players, the interesting thing is when you see these base hits, these home runs, these runs batted in, you're also seeing in those same games and over the course of that entire season a whole lot of misses, a lot of strikeouts. A lot of times when Cabrera might have even been responsible for losing a game, like he might have been the last out of that game, all of those successes and failures are visible in baseball. And so the question that I think about with regards to academic work is, what would our impressions of Cabrera look like if all we saw were the hits? If all we saw were the home runs, if all we saw were the games where they batted in the deciding run, what would we think about Cabrera's career? We'd probably think about them the same way we think about Susan White's career, or Bradley White's career, or Matt Jarrett's career, or Tom Davis's career. Because when we look at their CVs, what we tend to see are all the hits, all the home runs, all the successes. That's the way that we think about building academic records. All right. But what you'd also, what all of us on the call who have these faculty jobs, we will readily admit, is that all those successful things happened, but they sit in a big mountain of failure. Papers that were rejected, grants that weren't funded, all kinds of different scenarios that were often motivating factors for a lot of the things that we can count as pieces of work that we're proud of. That's all of our careers. Here are a few examples from mine. There was a paper we published now a little over 10 years ago with a colleague of mine, Jessica Marsh, who's on faculty at Lehigh University. Jess and I went to grad school together. We worked on a study back in grad school that became one of our first publications when we first started as faculty. That paper was slammed by 4 of the journals before Paul Frick took it as a brief report in JCAP in 2011. Right? This paper that we published in our annual review, now about 10 years ago, the first version of that paper we submitted, or I submitted as a grad student and it was rejected at the psychological review back in 2006. And over the course of several years, that paper sort of germinated. It didn't feel like the right time to submit that paper in '07 or '08 or 2010 or 2011. It wasn't until about 2012 where our lab started sharing the ideas that eventually became that paper. And the same was true for a paper that followed it afterwards. Actually, this paper we had in Psych Bowl about 7 years ago now, that paper was like a page one rewrite after the first submission to that journal. Steve Hinshaw was the action editor, came back to us after the first submission and said that none of the reviewers like this version of the paper. They want you to write another paper. Now, no guarantees on that paper getting published, but if you rewrite this thing entirely, it might have a shot. That's how that paper came about. A bunch of my colleagues who reviewed the paper told me, no good. We don't think that the field wants this paper, but this other paper that comes up in some of the ideas you had, that's a better paper. And the reviewers of that first submission saved us from ourselves, because that paper is a much better version of the one that we submitted. Grants are even worse. So the bunch of papers so go back to batting average. My hit rate sucks. If you go back to like the beginning of my career at Maryland, you look at all the grants we submitted where I was a PI, to the National Science Foundation, to the Institute of Education Sciences, the National Institute of Health, private foundations, the WT Grant Foundation, and other federal agencies like the DoD. You add all those up, it's north of 50 grant applications where I was a PI or a co-PI, and we've gotten 3 base hits. That batting average wouldn't have even got me into Little League, let alone the major leagues. It's pretty slow. It's low. Now, this might be a lower batting average than everybody else. I could be pretty bad at this grant writing thing, and I think I am. But this is my record. Lots of swings and misses. So one of the things that a lot of us have to become quick to get used to is this idea that with any one thing that we do, we write a paper, we submit a grant, we got to put our best foot forward. It's not like we can submit a grant that we say to ourselves, this is garbage, because it's just a waste of everybody's time. You submit something thinking this is a really good representation of our ideas right now. Same with the papers. But every time we do that, it's like, at least for myself, I have to switch from like, I'm really excited about this, and right when I submit it, I'm like, nah, we'll see what happens. They might just completely hate it. Oh well. How do I make that healthy? Because switching from like really positive to like doom and gloom is not the best way to. So the way I do it for myself is, let's say it's a paper, right? If it's a paper, I say to myself, okay, this is my plan A. I'm going to submit to a journal. And then while I'm doing that, I also write down all the other journals that I'll likely submit to in order if the first one gets rejected. It's like, this is my plan B, my plan C, my plan D, all the way down to E. That sounds on the surface depressing until you read the names of the journals, because every time I do this, I get to the plan E, and I say to myself, that's still an awesome place. Still a really good place. Still be a dream come true if that paper gets in there. Okay. And then that helps motivate me to get the paper out, because the sooner I get it to plan A, if they give me bad news, well, that's the quicker I'll send it to plan B. Now, that helps me complete one project, and that's just one project. So it's a bean, and it may very well grow to something amazing, but it might also just be a base hit on my record. So that's how I think about any one piece of work. And the last theme that we'll talk about one way of thinking in a healthy way about your record at large. So how do you get to a point where you say to yourself, I've built something for myself that I'm proud of, or what have you, which is hard to think about when you're still in doctoral training or postdoctoral training, right? Nicholas and others who know my background and where I draw inspiration from a variety of things related to professional development know that I dip into the Marvel Cinematic Universe a lot when I think about these kinds of things, and so I really like this example of mentoring that you see in the MCU. It has to do with Peter Parker. Now, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you don't start off thinking about a Spider-Man by seeing the first Spider-Man movie. You actually see him in another movie entirely, where he just gets a few minutes of that one movie, right? Part of that has to do with the fact that there've already been a bunch of other Spider-Man movies, so the folks who made the MCU sort of thought we don't really need to do like an origin story kind of movie for Spider-Man. We just need to embed him these interconnected films, and then we see if people want to see more of Spider-Man. That's how all of us wind up starting in graduate school. By the way, we don't actually get, nobody gives us the money for our own movie right when we get admitted to grad school. We get embedded in somebody else's movie, and we get 15 minutes of fame. Let's see if people want to see more of us. All right. So in the case of the Marvel movies, Peter Parker has a mentor. It's Iron Man. Iron Man gives him a whole bunch of different kinds of materials to sort of build his way up. He gets a startup package, and tuition remission and all kinds of stuff, and he gets the opportunity to be able to be involved in somebody else's story. Starts trying to do things that superheroes do, and then you try to see, like, okay, let's fake it till we make it here, guys, and if somebody wants to see more of us, we get funding to see another movie. Uh, that's how I started. That's how all of us started. This is a picture of myself with my research dad, Alan Kasdan, my research mom, Wendy Silverman. This is actually taken at Alan's Festschrift. Back in 2018, he retired, and we held a sort of like a full day kind of get together to sort of reminisce about Alan's work. Bunch of his colleagues, bunch of his students were in the crowd. It was a really awesome day, and that's actually, that picture represents the first time the three of us were in the same room together, because up until that time we had never been to the same conference or any other kind of place. So this is actually the three of us were together the first time in one room. It's pretty neat. Yeah, so I learned how to do this job by observing Wendy in her lab, then afterwards Alan in his lab. They gave me the tools to build a record, and then when I went to go look for a job, they vouched for me with the letters of recommendation and phone calls that I have no idea what the contents of them were. Hey, look, take a chance on this Yahoo and see where it takes you, and that's basically how it winds up. But it's the same kind of thing. I built my own story, my own kind of research program on the foundations of that story stem from the work that they did. And if you trace my work back to them, you can see very clear elements in them. And that's true of all the people that they both trained. I mean, you could do the same thing with Matt Knox work. Yeah, Alan doesn't study suicide right now, but at one point, he was instrumental in a lot of work that connects to suicide risk and depressed mood. You can draw that through line from Matt's work through Alan's work as well. You can do this with anybody's record, even if even if it looks on the surface like they study very different things from the mentor, you still see it. So when you trace back records, people's records back to the source, you see that mentors have stories, and then their mentees have stories as well. And the trick with any one story that's told is trying to figure out where the connections are, and then building out from there. And that story can go lots of different directions. So one way to sort of think about this from your own perspectives, for those of you on the call who are currently in doctoral or postdoctoral training, is to sort of think about, what has my mentor done? Where do I know they're headed? Because all of us are involved in work that's still making its way toward becoming products of their own. And sometimes when you see those patterns, they might give you ideas for the pattern for the kinds of stories you might tell, right? I am a big fan nowadays of not just consuming work for its content, but also picking it apart for its structure, right? So there's a lot that we can learn from what people are doing in their careers, like the actual articles, the actual chapters. But there's a lot to be learned oftentimes by how they got there. And so I tend to think that's a place where we can spend our time as well. How do they do it? That might not be the way in which I do it, but sometimes seeing that structure can allow us to get to glean food for thought. So there are a bunch of different kinds of things that we've discussed in relation to professional development. In this last sort of theme that we discussed, we were sort of talking about, well, how does one build a research program? How does one sort of figure out which story they'd like to tell? We actually go over a lot of this stuff at the Future Directions Forum, and there's an on-demand page that we have on our website that'll take you to a bunch of old things that we've done. We're trying to put the ones together to upload from 2021. We're taping all the ones for this year as well. Yeah, so that's all that I have for today. I hope oh yeah, good. I have enough time for questions. I'm really excited to